Hello, welcome to iHeart Cooking. I'm registered dietitian Jennifer Stachler.
And I'm Chef Dugan Wetzel.
We are brought to you by Reid Health, Community Benefits, WCTV, and RP&L. Today on this episode, we're going to be talking about how to cut the carbs with cauliflower. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about cutting the carbs with cauliflower. So we're going to be talking about two dishes that are usually a little bit higher in carbohydrates, and we're going to replace some of the ingredients with cauliflower to be able to not only to get a vegetable into the dish, but also to cut down those carbohydrates, which is always nice if you're, if you're experiencing diabetes or have elevated cholesterol and triglycerides. Cutting those carbohydrates out can be helpful with that. So we're going to start with actually a cauliflower shepherd's pie and then move into a cauliflower mac and cheese.
First thing we're going to do, actually, we are omitting the mashed potato layer entirely. We are using just cauliflower and a little bit of cream cheese and some seasonings to spread over top of our meat mixture. Yep. For this recipe, we are using a frozen cauliflower. We put this into boiling water and let it cook down for 8 to 10 minutes. Bring it out of the water and strain it, kind of get it really dry. Yep. That is a very important part of this. And another way that you can make that even more dry is you take the water out of the pot that you use to boil it in and then add that back in to kind of, since there is no more moisture in there, the hot pan just heats it up even more and it brings out all what else is left. So don't forget to take out as much moisture as you can. It will really help you at the end of this. So what we went ahead and did, we've got our cauliflower. It's already re-dried, it's soft. We're going to add this to our mixer. I'll get in there. Okay.
And this basic step you're doing at the beginning of this recipe is just like making those mashed potatoes, but again, you're making the cauliflower mashed potatoes.
Absolutely.
And that's the cream cheese, just a little bit of cream cheese. You could use some unsalted butter in place of that, or even some plain Greek yogurt to add more of that nutrition aspect to it. Depends on the creaminess of that too, because this adding some cream cheese is going to get it a little bit more creamier. Cauliflower doesn't really have a lot of taste to it, so it's going to help bring that creaminess and the taste into that cauliflower a little bit more.
Another thing you can do, you're right, cauliflower has very little flavor. It has its own distinct flavor. You can add some herbs, different spices to it, depending on what you're wanting your dish to reflect. A lot of people will put like an Italian seasoning. Other people will go more of a Southwest feel and put some cumin and some cayenne, maybe a little red pepper in there too, just to make something different and spice it up.
Absolutely. So you don't got that basic shepherd's pie. You kind of got
something new,
different.
Absolutely. So we're just going to go ahead and turn it on and pulse our cauliflower. Just keep an eye on it. If you feel like it's too dry, if it doesn't have the consistency of mashed potatoes, you can just add a little bit of water to it to kind of thin it out. Again, not too much, just enough to get that consistency of mashed potatoes. So. So we're almost there. Just kind of checking on it. There's still a little moisture in there, so we're just going to keep going. All right, so there's no more chunks of the cream cheese. The cauliflower is completely pureed, and if you're looking at home, you wouldn't be able to tell that that's cauliflower and not mashed potatoes. So
I'd say a lot of times I make the cauliflower in place of the mashed potatoes. Just again, get another vegetable that's not starchy into my family's diet. But the nice thing about it is they don't really taste a difference with that either. The only time they would is if you do sometimes boil that cauliflower off. It can have a distinct smell, and that's usually what lets my, especially my husband know, hey, you're not making those regular mashed potatoes like you usually do. You're using something else in the place. But for the most part, like you mentioned, you're not going to notice the difference when you look at it.
So our next step, we're going to go ahead and cook off our meat ingredients.
Yep.
So you're just going to turn the stovetop on here to medium-high. Let that go for a little bit, kind of warm up before you add any of your stuff. A little bit of oil, and then we're going to add our meat. For this one, we're using a lean 90-10 ground beef, but you can use ground turkey, ground chicken,
Absolutely.
anything. That's a lot more lean than beef is. It's absolutely.
Yeah, you can be versatile within any of the protein that you use within this. It doesn't, again, have to be that classic shepherd's pie.
Right, yeah. Yeah, because a lot of classic shepherd's pie actually use chunks of beef, and it's a stew, and it's really hearty and thick, where this is going to be, you're going to notice it's cleaner, it's lighter, there's not so much fat, but you're still not missing the flavor that you would get from shepherd's pie. So we're going to go ahead and add just a little bit of oil into our pan. Let that heat up, and you'll be able to smell it. We're using an olive oil, so you'll really start to smell that olive flavor. And we have a little bit of water, a little bit of moisture, and you can hear that sizzle, that pop. That means that you're getting ready to add your ingredients and start cooking. So, swirl it around a little bit. Starting to smell the olive oil, so we'll just go ahead and add our beef.
When you're looking at ground beef, like let's say you go to the grocery store and you're like, what's going to be the leanest choice? When they say 90-10, we're meaning 90% lean, 10% fat. You can find some that are 97% lean, 3% fat, 93% lean, 7% fat. I think that's about the lowest I've seen it here is 93, 95, but I haven't seen any leaner than that within the area. But that second number we want to try to get as low as possible. Unfortunately, as they lower the fat percentage, the price of a lot of those meats go up.
Absolutely. So we're just going to let that go for a little bit. Start to get brown, and then we'll add the rest of our ingredients to it. So we went ahead and cooked off our beef. We're almost there. There's still a little bit of pink in it, and now is a good time to add the rest of your ingredients. Most recipes are going to show you want to brown your beef and then take it out of the pan, drain all the fat, and then cook all of your vegetables in here. Actually, what we're going to do today is just keep the beef in there. It's not completely cooked yet, so while we're cooking all the rest of these vegetables, it'll finish cooking the rest of the way. Reason that I'm doing this is we're going to use that fat that's in there because it's going to, it's got fat, there's a little bit of water in there, so it's creating steam, as you see. So not only are you getting the cooking process of the cooktop, but you're also getting that steam too. It's 212 degrees. It's hot enough to steam anything. So it just kind of speeds up your cooking process a little bit. So. And
when Dugan's talking that fat, again, we're choosing lower fat products. We have the olive oil, which is a good healthy fat, so you're not getting for sale, extra fat or anything by all means. By just rinsing that, if you did want to take it off, use a different pan, you can. You're really not going to make that big of difference in the fat when in the end results.
Yeah, fat content is, absolutely, you're right. It's more for just the steaming aspect of everything. Yeah. Now, everything that we're going to add into this, we've got some diced onions, carrots, we're using mushrooms. Mushrooms are super filled with water. So again, once those cook off, you're going to have even more steam coming out of it to help you cook the rest of it. We're going to do a little bit of celery, Worcestershire sauce, if you can say that, garlic, tomato paste, pretty much everything you'd put into a shepherd's pie or some type of stew. So we're going to just continue adding all of our products here. A little bit of tomato paste, some garlic, and the last one here, we're just using a low sodium beef broth.
So So again, the original recipe we had for this did call to add some salt. We omitted that out because, again, you're getting some of the sodium from the actual low sodium beef broth.
Right.
That you don't need to add more of that in there. And with all the other spices and ingredients, you're not going to miss it too much either.
No, you're really not going to know. Yeah. So we've gone ahead and let our beef mixture kind of cook down a little bit. Usually it's going to take you about 15-20 minutes to cook it all the way through. But since we left all that moisture in there, it's actually cut it down to, I'd say, about 10 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of really sped it up. What we're going to do is we're going to add some frozen peas in here. And all we're going to do is incorporate them, kind of mix them around, and then we're going to go ahead and put it straight into our pan. Reason we're using frozen peas is they're one, cold. They're going to hold up as they're sitting in the oven. It's a 400-degree oven for a half an hour or so. They're going to keep their shape as they're in the heat, and they're just going to, it's just a nice splash of color. We got a lot of browns and a lot of orange. You need something else. This green frozen pea is perfect for it.
Which peas is a part of the original shepherd's pie as well. If you do want to look at a maybe less calorie, less carb vegetable, I mean, you could possibly look at asparagus or broccoli and kind of switch it up. You're not going to be that traditional shepherd's pie, but you still get the vegetable aspect, and you could get one that's a little non-starchy.
Right.
If you would prefer that. But by, again, changing out the mashed potatoes for the cauliflower, you're already kind of doing that step where having those peas in there actually provides a starch in there, which you wouldn't get otherwise.
So you're just going to run your spoon over top of them, kind of smooth them out in there. Then you're going to add your next layer, which is your cauliflower. Treat it just like mashed potatoes. Just kind of scoop it out and dollop it in here. As you can see, it's really got that consistency, and if they didn't actually see you cook with cauliflower, nobody is going to know.
Nope.
So that's what's so interesting and fun about it all.
Absolutely. Cauliflower is very versatile. Not only can you do the mashed potatoes, but now there's even cauliflower rice. You can use cauliflower pizza crust. We're going to do mac and cheese next. So that's something that you can use it in a lot of dishes that are relatively higher in carbs and higher in calories.
So now we're just smoothing it out.
Say another way you can actually bake this besides putting it in a big dish is, again, kind of like previous episodes where you can actually use cupcake tins and actually do individual servings of this and use the cupcake tins for that, and it actually can speed up the cooking time at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. Smaller portions, you can control it.
Yep.
Yeah, and less surface area that it has to cook, so much faster.
It's kind of a neat presentation too, is when you kind of have that nice little cupcake kind of shepherd's pie look when you're serving it to individuals.
So now we are going to take a low-fat mozzarella cheese and just go over the top of it here. Just cover the cauliflower. See, I almost called them mashed potatoes because that's what they look like. There we go. And then finally, we're doing a little bit of paprika and some Parmesan cheese. So we've omitted our salt. Parmesan is going to help with that. And the paprika, it's also kind of one of those good tips. Like if you're cooking chicken at home and boneless, skinless chicken breast, when you cook them, they look kind of boring. They just stay plain colored. Paprika is a nice thing to add to it because it's not a lot of color, or not a lot of flavor, excuse me, but it has that cooked color, so it almost gives the appearance of a roasted chicken. So that's kind of what we're doing here on the top of this. So.
Like you said, it's still not a lot of flavor, but it still gives that little bit of flavor where you can have less of the salt too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is nice.
So we'll just mix that.
And it looks pretty. You can see because you got the mozzarella cheese, the cauliflowers on top, mashed cauliflower on top, and also the Parmesan, white on white on white, and that kind of gives it some color there too.
Absolutely. So it's ready to go in the oven. I think I said 400 degrees earlier. It's actually 350 for about 45 minutes, and then it'll be ready to go.
Yep. So while our shepherd's pie is actually in the oven baking, we're going to move forward with our next recipe, which is a cauliflower mac and cheese casserole. So again, we're cutting those carbs with cauliflower using less pasta. As you see, we still have some here on the table here, but we're going to be adding that cauliflower in there as well, not only to cut the carbs, but to actually add a vegetable in the dish as well.
Certainly. And for this one, we're actually using fresh cauliflower. You can use the frozen, but I think the fresh has a nicer texture to it when it's being baked off like this. Still in large chunks, maybe 1-inch cubes. Nothing much larger than that, but you're basically just going to put it in the bottom of your pan, cover your pan, the whole bottom with it, and then we're going to start our next step, which is cooking off the chicken. We've went ahead and started our pan to get it warmed up.
Yep.
All we're going to do is season the chicken and then put it straight into the pan.
So while Dugan's kind of cutting that up, we're going to season the chicken. We have some pepper and garlic powder, again, omitting a lot of the salt that was originally in this recipe to do more low sodium, heart healthy, and this gives a lot of flavor at the same time. So we'll kind of just put that on top of the chicken here, and we'll get ready to start cooking this off.
I got a clean hand here. Let me help you. Check it with a little water. You can see it's starting to turn white, so it's ready to cook. So we're just going to go straight on there.
So as we get finished with putting the cauliflower into the dish, we have our chicken being cooked off. We're just going to brown on each side for about a minute and a half after we season that, and then we're going to cut that actually into chunks, put it in the casserole, because when it bakes in the oven, it's going to cook the chicken the rest of the way through. So you don't have to have it completely cooked through in this process.
Right. All right. So we've got the bottom of our pan covered with cauliflower. We're going to go ahead and clean this spot up. Make some room for chicken.
So you ready for it?
Yeah, we can go ahead and do that. There you go. Small cubes again. Don't, like Jennifer said, don't worry that it's not cooked through. Obviously, all you're doing here is trying to get a nice sear. By searing it, you're going to add that flavor. You're going to have just that extra crunch to the outside that searing does to it. And that's really all you're doing that for. So went ahead and cut it into cubes, and we're just going to add it straight into our dish here. We're going to go ahead and clean that up, and then we're going to start on our cheese sauce.
So we're going to get started with our cheese sauce. We're going to add some low-fat milk in there. You can actually use any other type of milk as well. You can use even dairy-free if something you're looking at. Lactose, if you want to kind of lactose intolerant, want to use a different type of milk. But choosing the low fat, you're going to reduce the calories, reduce the saturated fats, which is going to help with weight loss, but also heart disease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're actually using, it's not fat-free, it is a 1%. The reason that you are using a 1% is because the next step here, you're going to add some flour, and flour needs something to hold on to and bind. So that's kind of what that fat is for. Also, since you are using a fat in this, you want to make sure that you're stirring it very frequently, because if you let it go for too long, it starts to brown, it starts to scald on the bottom of the pan, which is going to impart kind of a burnt taste flavor to it. Yep. And you don't ever want to have that with a cheese sauce. So just make sure, pretty frequently you stir it around, make sure you can feel it if anything's on the bottom of it. So if it starts to feel a little gritty, you can kind of turn down your heat and keep an eye on it that way, or just sit there and just stir it until it's heated up.
So our milk is actually heated up. Like I said, we kind of sat here and stirred it and watched it, and now we're going to be adding in our flour. It's going to be a thickening component for that sauce.
Just a tablespoon at a time. you're going to be able to tell when it's really thicker, because when you're stirring, you've stirred that milk, there's really just a little bit of fat. There's not any of that flour that's going to hold on to it to thicken it up at all. So the more flour you add in there, the harder it's going to be to stir. And then, maybe about 3 tablespoons is probably going to be a safe bet for you in this sauce. So just going to stir it, because flour, once it reaches that hot liquid, it tends to just ball up really quick. So you've got to really stir and make sure you get all those lumps and those chunks out of there so that it evenly disperses within the fat. I'm going to go ahead and do another one here. Really nice forearm workout too.
Get a little bit of your workout for the day.
Absolutely.
Getting you ready for the dish that you're going to consume. And to kind of finish it, we're going to be adding some cheddar cheese to that, and then also a chicken broth. And that's going to be about the last component of this dish before we really put it into the oven to bake off.
So we can tell by stirring it's starting to get a little thicker. So you're almost there. Maybe 1 more tablespoon of flour and we'll be ready to go. Okay, now the last part, we're going to add our cheddar cheese to it. About 8 ounces of cheddar cheese. We used about 3 cups of milk and 3 tablespoons of flour for this recipe. And that cheese, as you can see, melted really fast. You can see how thick it is. That's kind of why we're adding the chicken broth. You can use a vegetable broth if you'd like, but since there's diced chicken in here, we just went ahead and used the chicken broth. That's going to help thin it back out as it goes into this recipe, or into this cauliflower blend.
And it's a good way to add some flavor there as well. Since we're not using the salt, we omitted that out of there. The chicken broth would have some in that, so you're adding some flavor back into the dish.
Certainly. We're just going to go ahead and add that in here. Kind of incorporate it. As you can see, it's thinning it out a little bit. Don't worry if it's too wet, because it's going in the oven. We're going to cook it for about 5 minutes, pull it out and add some noodles into it, and then all that loose sauce is actually going to absorb into the noodles. It's going to help cook the chicken. It's going to get in that cauliflower. So if it's a little thin, don't stress. It'll be all right. Yeah. Okay. So we just go over the top. We'll just mix it up just a little bit. Make sure all the cauliflower's got cheese on it. We'll spread it out evenly. Now that'll go into the oven for 5 minutes. We'll pull it out and add our noodles to it. So we've been 5 minutes. We're going to go ahead and pull this out. As you can see, like we said, it's a little loose still, but that's okay, because we're going to add our noodles and kind of incorporate everything together, and that loose sauce is going to absorb in. So just going to go over the top. It doesn't take a lot of noodles. I think the recipe calls for a box. We're probably using about a half of a box here.
Yeah, you can definitely cut those out since you have that cauliflower in there. You don't need as many or as much pasta in the dish itself.
All right. Spread that out. We're just going to top it with a little bit of breadcrumb. Back in another 5 to 10 minutes, and we'll kind of check on things and see where we're going. All right, so we are going to go ahead and check our stuff in here. Shepherd's pie is looking good and brown. It's probably ready and safe to pull out. And the mac and cheese, you can see everything's been absorbed. So it's actually ready. So it's kind of timed it perfectly here.
Absolutely.
You can see that nice brown color. That Parmesan cheese has really, really caramelized itself on top. So.
And even those breadcrumbs and some of the cauliflower you can see is browned as well. So yeah, it worked out well doing the last 15 minutes of that with the mac and cheese
Absolutely.
dish. Not that you would possibly make both of these at the same time, but it is
You
doable.
can do it, yeah. So we're going to go ahead and cut into it and serve it up and let you know how it tastes.
So now that we got both dishes served up here, we're going to take a bite and kind of let you know how it is.
There we go.
And get a piece of chicken in here with the cauliflower. Eating this, I never guessed there's cauliflower in there, to be honest. It's creamy, even though you have the chunks at the bottom. It's very creamy, a lot of good flavor. Very good, healthy dish. My daughter would love that, actually.
Yeah, exactly the same thing with the shepherd's pie. That cheese over the top kind of created that barrier to keep that moisture in, which, again, that's why it was important to make sure all that moisture was out of the cauliflower when we started this process, because it'd be just a wet, soupy mess. But this is, yeah, have no idea that this is cauliflower.
So it's a great way to, again, cut those carbs in there, kind of cut the calories, get a vegetable intake into a dish. Most of the time, these are both 60 minutes or less. I mean, you're looking at 30 minutes possibly or less. I mean, there is a lot of assembly with these, but it's definitely doable. Don't let the amount of ingredients or the amount of assembly kind of scare you away from these dishes.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed all the recipes that we did today with cutting the carbs with cauliflower.
If you'd like more recipes like today's episodes, you can visit reidhealth.org/iHeartCooking.
We'll see you next month.